What bends my mind is that I think there's this perception that when we take psychedelics, we are leaving reality and going off into an altered state, which appears to be true, but what bends my mind is I think that what we're experiencing in the psychedelic journey might be as real as what we're experiencing right now in the normal world.
Mindbend. Non-ordinary and extraordinary states of consciousness for Mindbend Creative.
Every great spiritual lesson is actually an improv. Be present. Don't insist on your own stuff.
Every great spiritual lesson is actually an improvisation.
Yeah, it is.
Boil that down.
Sure. So saying yes and, being present with your partner, making your partner look good, not insisting on your own way, and not holding on to anything because, like a play can be repeated over and over and over again. An improv is ephemeral. You have this beautiful scene, or maybe not so beautiful, and then it's gone, and it will never exist again. And that's impermanence. It was beautiful, I loved it, and it's never going to happen again.
So you wanted to talk about the hero's journey today as sort of a focal point for our overall discussion, and I love that because as we discussed, I'm fond of that too, and I think it's been integral to a lot of people's orientation of how to view the self in the context of history and goals and identity. But I want to stick on creativity for a little bit because if the psychedelic experience has helped unlock a creative potential in you, I think that's something that's that I haven't covered as much in discourse with others on the subject. So if we can like sort of ruminate on it. I mean, obviously, this is the book Trip of a Lifetime, and this is a massive creative work. So congratulations, first of all, on getting the book accomplished. That's no small feat.
Thank you.
But talk about how you've come into creativity through this psychedelic experience.
Sure. I think by nature we're creative. Like as kids, we want to play, and we do it in this shameless way. Like a kid is going to finger paint or draw without any expectation of, I need to impress somebody or I have to be good at it. That's the trap we adults fall into. Oh, I'm not going to do that because I'm not great at it right away. And so I think that child that was inside me that was so creative and so imaginative, he got put aside. Because we grow up and we get jobs and we get kids and obligations and all these things take over our lives and we don't make time for creativity. We don't even maybe think it's important. And so after psychedelics, whoosh, in my very first psychedelic retreat, the one that changed my life, on the second day, while on medicine, they invited me out into the foyer and there's all these blank canvases there. Well, I've never painted before in my life. But in the medicine, there was no thought of insecurity or needing to impress somebody. So I just kind of sat down like a child and looked at the blank canvas and thought, oh, I know exactly what to paint. And I painted this wild drawing, and it perfectly captured like who I was and how I felt in that moment. And it hangs up on my living room right now. And it's not a masterpiece, but to me it's a masterpiece because of what it represents and the moment that it captured. And after that, I started just diving into creativity. Like I let that imaginative child just run free. And some things I tried I wasn't particularly good at. Nobody needs to hear me butchering the Beatles probably on the guitar, but I'm gonna go explore that. Painting, there's not like a natural talent there, but other things I tried, there's a natural talent there. I'm going to keep following that. And so I've wanted to be a writer since I was a child, so that was a very easy path to go down. And then improv became my love. Like, it is so fun. It is so liberating. Photography, like in my living room, my once blank walls are now covered up with probably 30 photographs. And I don't understand any mechanics around photograph, but damn, after psychedelics, I have an eye for beauty. And I can honestly look at those photographs and go like, that is beautiful. And they all represent some moment in my life, some adventure, some travel, some person. Yeah.
You spent 25 years in the military. What branch of the service?
The Air Force.
Okay. And you knew that was something from an early age that a path you would go down? Was that something you had in mind? No? Okay.
Oh, no. My parents leaned a little bit hippie. My dad would joke I was almost born at Canada because he wanted to dodge the Vietnam draft. And I grew up in a somewhat wealthy suburb of San Francisco, so very, wealthy and liberal, and nobody joined the military. Nobody joined the military. It was very much my path. I think in my late teens, I was a very chaotic young man. And there was some bit of wisdom inside me that knew, okay, how do I contain this chaotic male energy and channel it somehow? And the thought occurred to me, I think the military is a path. Like, where does a young chaotic man go to find some structure and find some discipline? And frankly, to have somebody telling me what to do and when to do it, because I didn't have that growing up. I had a very laissez-faire experience growing up, both from my family and my, alternative hippie school, right?
Yeah.
And maybe there was some rebellion in there, but no, like I need structure, I need discipline. And once I got in there, it was like that.
It made sense?
It did. It made perfect sense. I went in, enlisted. Within 3 years, I finished a degree in computer science. I went off to officer training school, became an officer, and I just really thrived once I could kind of channel and contain that fire inside me.
May I ask what the volatile or combustible or chaotic energy, how it was manifesting in your late adolescence?
Sure. So I wound up graduating from high school at 16 and getting launched out into the world.
Problem child.
Yeah, but then when I got off to college, like I didn't have the discipline for it. I didn't have the tools. And so I'd go for a little while and I'd quit. I'd have a job for a little while and I'd quit. In 4 years of this, like 4 years of just bouncing around, and eventually it wound up becoming very problematic. I was a mess. Like 19-year-old Ben was a complete mess.
Because you had this proclivity to be curious, you had an aptitude for multiple things, you had a capacity to learn and to produce, but it was kind of all over the place. There was something about it that was sort of unmoored.
It was wild. I was a wild.
Was it a
kid.
depressed wild? Was there a sadness at the core of it? Were there traumas that were motivating a lot of the behavior?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And I just want to I want to keep depression and that concept and needing to seek a therapy in order to transcend that awareness and work through something, evolve past something. That's a big part of your writing. It's a big part of your background. So I want to make sure that is clear as we address like the stages of your growth, because if you sustained something that could begin to be fundamental to a lifetime of depression at an early age, maybe others who are watching this or listening can identify and trace back their paths in a similar fashion. So your early chaos and proclivity towards, I don't know, like unrest did have like roots in a sense of depression or something that could manifest in that later?
Yes. I suppose it started in grade school. I was a very unusual and therefore very lonely child.
Public school?
Yeah, public school. And so I kind of retreated into my imagination and into books because I didn't know how to connect with other human beings. And then in 6th grade, I went from a public school to a small alternative private school. And I remember when I got there, one of the older kids said, "Why are you so quiet? Were you molested or something?" Like, that's how terrified I was of human beings. But this school was weird. It was an unusual school, and it was being run by these hippies, for lack of a better word. The principal, Ron, we called him, was, a deadhead. And we didn't have PE, we didn't have chemistry, we didn't have physics, but we had rock and roll class, we had movie class, and we had this student-teacher ratio that was 8-to-1. And there was where I fell in love with English, with books. I had this one teacher, Lisa, and she introduced me to all of the greats from, Henry David Thoreau and Kurt Vonnegut, and I remember we were reading Allen Ginsberg's Howl out in the field, and I love that stuff. And it brought me out because suddenly, like, I'm at a school where it's the island of misfit toys and I can be their king, versus the more normal world of public school.
So you became more sociable.
Oh, yes.
Quickly.
Yeah. I learned that, okay, I can, in this environment, in this community of openness and acceptance, I can actually be myself and be loved.
Okay, that's good. That's not a depressing idea.
No, that was kind of a golden era for me. But then when I left that school at 16, I lost my community. I lost my, structure, and just really floundered. And I didn't understand the depression for a long time. And in psychedelics, I discovered that depression for me was actually extremely simple. The way I describe it in the book is emotional constipation.
Yeah.
So growing up when I did, there is that, boys don't cry message that we get to, suppress emotions. My dad was a very stoic man, so my model of masculinity was not a, feeling one. And then I enter the military, where putting aside your feelings and doing what has to be done is essential, actually. And you can do that for a while. But after 25 years, and after Iraq and Afghanistan, and especially after my father's death, it just became too much for me to bear. I did not know how to process all of the emotions inside of me, and so all of them kind of got stuck in this emotional constipation. And so psychedelics became for me the emotional laxative, and from the very first time I did them, whoosh, everything came out. All of the grief, all of the pain, all of the sorrow came out. And once my heart was cleared and cleansed and empty, then emotions start flowing freely. And the thing about being emotionally constipated is it doesn't just lock up the negative emotions like grief and hurt. It keeps you from feeling joy and aliveness and freedom and love as well. And so once the heart was cleansed, it was like, I can feel joy, I can feel love, I can feel creativity, like everything just flowed. And now when it flowed, it wasn't getting stuck. I still feel sadness, I still feel hurt, I still feel jealousy, like I still feel all those normal emotions, but they don't get stuck anymore, they just flow. They flow naturally. And the great thing about feelings is they're all temporary. Some last longer than others, but they're all temporary, and they're all there wanting to be felt and expressed. And if you can feel them and express them, then they just pass like clouds across the sky.
What has writing the book meant to you so far?
I've thought of it as my love letter to the world. I've thought of it as an attempt to capture everything that I've learned on this healing journey. And I really wrote it for the reader. The first attempt at a book was a memoir. And it was the story of, my growing up, and then ultimately my story of traveling around the world trying these different medicines. And 320 pages into it, I asked myself a question: who did you write this for? And there's no wrong answer there, but I had to ask that question: who did I write this for? And the answer was, I wrote it for me, which is fine, but that's not what I want to present to the world. So I put it aside and I started over from scratch. And this was me starting over from scratch with the reader in mind every
Mindful.
step of the way.
Yeah,
so no longer memoir, but actually self-help book.
Yeah, and a manual, a
Yes.
reference text. This is meant potentially to accompany someone on their own hero's journey through the process of healing, potentially through utilizing a psychedelic modality, psilocybin specifically.
Yeah.
How did you settle on psilocybin, if I may ask?
So I'll step back. I actually, although yes, there's a mushroom there on the cover, and I do tell this story of my first experience with psilocybin, but I actually tried to write it in a very general way for anybody who's doing a high dose psychedelic experience. Microdosing is not a part of this book. There's other books that can address that, but the big experience, whether it's a heroic dose of mushrooms or a big dose of ayahuasca, iboga, you name it, it can actually address all of those. I tried to keep it kind of high level, and the book's divided up basically into 3 sections: preparation, navigation, and integration. And I tried to write it for somebody who maybe can't even spell the word psychedelics. Because I was in the military for 25 years, I wasn't even, smoking weed. And so my first experience was a heroic dose of mushrooms.
5 grams.
Yes. And so where does somebody like me start? Maybe they read Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind. Maybe they saw a documentary or an article. Okay, now where do I start? And so there's 3 chapters on preparation where you think about what medicine is calling to you. Do I want to experience this in a group or with one other person? What are the intentions that I want to bring to the journey to really prepare for it? And then navigation is how do you deal with the big experiences, big emotions, big revelations that might be coming up to you, the things that might scare you when you're in that experience. And then maybe the most important part, I devote 4 chapters to integration, which is how do you bring that experience and those lessons into your life. And so I think for somebody like me who didn't know anything about psychedelics, this is a very friendly starting place. Mm-hmm. There's so many books out there about psychedelics, and they're brilliant, but a lot of them are very, journalistic, academic, maybe head-centric. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't finding a book out there at the time that was heart-centric and that was self-helpy. Like, where's the kind of self-helpy book that's in that inspirational, friendly style? How to win friends and influence people. I joked about a title for this, The 7 Habits of Highly Psychedelic People. Like that kind of book, like here's the principles, here's the steps, and it can be vulnerable and funny, and here's some client stories that you might relate to. Here's my story, which is woven in through there that you might relate to. Yeah, the actual friendly, inspirational, simple self-help book to psychedelics.
But you've stepped into a whole new role, a new vocation in your life as a guide for others.
I have. I knew it immediately, too. When I was having my first psychedelic experience in a retreat center, I turned to the psychologist and I said, this is the most interesting thing in the world. I need to be a part of this somehow. But I also knew I needed to be patient. I can't just walk out there as a guy who had one big experience and be a leader, right? So I spent a couple years working on myself, working through my own stuff. I got certified as a coach, began working with clients to help them prepare and integrate experiences. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to write the book, and I'm ready to go, be a writer and a speaker and a leader in this space. I spent 25 years being a leader of men in the military, and after a hibernation period of about 4 years, it was like, okay, I'm ready to go be a leader of men again, but just in a very different way. And I'm in an unusual position for somebody my age where I don't actually have to work again through various, decisions and investments I've made. So there's that question like, okay, if there's no obstacles, what would I do with the rest of my life? And it's this. Yeah. This is it for me. And I love being in that position because I never have to look at anybody as a customer. I never have to look at anybody as, a client that I need money from. It can actually come from a pure place in my heart. Mm-hmm. I found gold inside myself. Perhaps I can help you find gold inside yourself too. Mm-hmm. So I knew from the get-go, and I know still today, almost 5 years later, this is my mission in life. I was born for this, and I really want to devote the rest of my life to this. For me, there is no other worthy quest. This is it.
And you have a family as well, correct?
Yes, I have 2 children. They're both grown, 26 and 20. I divorced after the psychedelic experience, so I don't have a lot of, commitments outside of this mission, which is a really beautiful place to be. And I'm also in a position where I can talk very openly about this. Mm-hmm. I don't have a boss that I need to, worry about finding out about this. Everybody in my life, from my kids to my elderly aunts and uncles, everybody in my world knows about this. And I am fairly shameless about talking about my experiences. The book starts in chapter 1 with me being in a psych ward for 3 days, and I feel no shame about that.
When was that?
That was almost 5 years ago. It was Veterans Day of 2020.
Prior to your psychedelic experience?
Yes. Yeah, it's where this journey began. In fact, chapter 1, the first line in the book is, on Veterans Day of 2020, I found myself trapped in a psych ward in Salt Lake City. And I was there for 3 days. I self-admitted for suicidal ideation and treatment-resistant depression. And it was obvious at the end of those few days in the psych ward, these people can't help me. All they have is more pills and more therapy, the same stuff I've already tried and it's never worked. And so I came out of that experience in the psych ward like, okay, nobody's coming to save me. I need to save myself. I need to be my own hero.
There was something in you that had the resolve and the, I guess, really like self-care and self-respect enough to survive and not follow through on suicidal ideation. There was something, a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of inspiration that you were able to draw from.
Yeah.
I find the crossover between the greater psychedelic community and the history of psychedelics and the history of psychedelic medicine in indigenous communities all over the planet and our Western perspective on what is this thing and how can it help or hurt us, and then it winds up in legislation, right? But I find the military as a general amorphous voice to be really, really a powerful and provocative component of this overall story. Because I think a lot of people consider what people who join the armed forces and have careers in the military, they're more relatable, I think, to a broad range of people. I think the far experimental, far creative types that might engage in like psychedelic use or experimentation for whatever, any number of reasons, maybe not necessarily therapeutic, right? But maybe with broad strokes, it's harder for a larger percentage of people to identify with that as much as it is the cross-section of Americans who wind up in the armed forces, right? So I find that voices who have served and then experienced psychedelic modalities and have made it a point to share about that really have power to reach people and to influence opinion and thought. And it doesn't always have to be a conversation about legislation. I spent a long time learning about various efforts in this country and then the different factions and camps that are opposing one another on what does that mean? What does it look like? What does that mean for our capitalist consumer type society? And where can we really move the needle in smaller segments of our culture? But I think it's highly important that veterans are able to work with their feelings and work with people like yourself that can understand some of what they've experienced in that container of being in the military. Can you speak to how your work is developing and has developed with veterans specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. I realize that there is a gift in my military experience as I go out there and try to connect with people, because we are a unique population in the sense that we're sympathetic to both the left and the right.
What does that mean when you say it? I'm so wary of those terms right now. And
sure.
so to say, like, please just tell me what.
So I think because of the history of psychedelics, especially in the 60s, it became associated with, hippies and the anti-war movement and Woodstock and those sort of things.
Anti-establishment.
Yeah, anti-establishment. But it's curious when you watch the legislation, it is very nonpartisan. In the introduction to the book, I actually talk about Governor Rick Perry. He was the former governor of Texas, first Trump administration. And he was on a podcast earlier this year, and he said some very interesting things about iboga, this psychedelic plant from West Africa. He said, I am a true believer in plant medicine. You cannot argue with the data. I am the Johnny Appleseed of iboga. This could be the most important medicine that mankind has ever discovered. And so whether it's somebody, on the right like him or somebody like AOC on the left, like this is actually a place where across partisan lines there is collaboration that is driven by the data that's coming out of research, and specifically around sympathy towards veterans who are struggling to a large degree by what the government has put these people through. And so when I go out to speak, I realize, okay, that's a foot in the door to conversations with people.
It's
And
a common, something in common.
yeah. And there is, by virtue of being, in the military, having served in Iraq and Afghanistan, there is, I think a respect and a willingness to listen than if I had come from a different background.
Yeah, you've done something
Yeah.
for us by most accounts. Now we'll do something for you by at least affording you our attention.
Yeah. And I'm realizing more and more there's been other gifts from the military as I go into psychedelics. So when I first went into psychedelics, I kind of approached it like a military mission.
A mission.
I did all of my research. I made sure that I was doing it in a safe environment. I'm being very methodical about my intentions, that I have, some space afterwards to integrate the experience. Like I kind of was organizing it in a certain way as if it was a military mission. And I went into it with the same spirit. I'm going all in. This is do or die. This is the mission, and you're going to give yourself to this 100%. So as odd as it might sound, I kind of went at psychedelics like a military mission, and it worked. Mm-hmm. It really did work. And even in writing the book, I was thinking about what are the influences to my writing style here? And obviously there's many of them, but damn it, I went to 3 military colleges to get advanced degrees, Air Command and Staff College, Air War College, Naval Postgraduate School. So I kind of learned to write like a military guy, and I was an instructor in international relations for military officers. And so I know military writing very well. And we write in a way that is very organized, very simple, very direct, easy to understand, and nothing superfluous. And so as I'm writing it, I'm like, okay, does that word absolutely need to be there? Nope. Can those 2 sentences be one? Yes. Did I write that paragraph to be clever, or did I write it for the reader? Oh, I wrote that to be clever. And so the longer I wrote the book, the shorter it got, which is good because we all have rather short attention spans these days. So even though I didn't set out to be the military guy in this mission, I realized more and more that what I learned from those 25 years is actually invaluable in this mission.
And part of that was finding a clear way to communicate the information.
Yes, absolutely. I had so much, practice in communication. As an officer at the end of my career, I reflected the most important college courses I ever took were English and drama, because that was all I was doing all day long. I'm either communicating in words or I'm standing up in front of a crowd communicating a message that everybody in the room needs to understand.
Yeah. What do you think is happening with people right now? What's your take on how people feel? Where are they coming to you from? What are they sharing? What are components of the zeitgeist that are deeply penetrating, deeply affecting, and needing attention and needing communication?
That's a wonderful question. I think if I had to describe it, as simple as this sounds, it's a lack of love.
Yeah.
I think it's a lack of love for ourselves. I think we're conditioned to not love ourselves. And I think it's a lack of love with others. We're very lonely. We are a very lonely people. And there's a multitude of reasons for that, but I think that at the essence it is. I really do think it comes down to a lack of love for oneself and a lack of love with our fellow human beings.
Yeah. I always say that I have a tremendous sympathy for human beings because I believe that fundamentally we really are alone and we don't know what's going on here. I think we've created, with respect to everyone's like core beliefs and structures that they live through, a lot of that can be religion oriented or deity oriented, but I really feel like we don't know why we're here. We don't know what this is and how it's going on. And we don't have a lot of elegant ways to explore that unknowingness together. We started off by talking about play and creation, and that's just, it's a warm and giving fundamental impulse. And I like this, what you first said about coming out of your experience and being given a canvas to paint on. Because I think that kind of tech, that kind of strategy can be so fundamentally inspiring and motivating. So you're talking about a lack of love, and I think that makes perfect sense, but we're great with creating problems to solve through new technologies, but we're not awesome about setting aside time, space, and methodologies to work through fundamental existential problems, right? So you can be addressing that in integration work, right? Like you know that someone's just gone through a psychedelic journey, specifically maybe under your supervision or care. And how can you, knowing what we know about what people are suffering from fundamentally, talk about the tools of integration and how we can use this very unique time of vulnerability, leap of faith, an aspect of the hero's journey to build from there through integration.
Yeah, so I have 4 chapters on integration. The first one is called Live Your Elixir. Because in the hero's journey, we leave the ordinary world, we face resistance, we meet the mentor, and then we enter the cave. And in psychedelics, we enter the cave within. And then we come back out with the treasure or with the elixir. And that's always going to be unique to every person. The elixir that you find is going to be different from what I find. So I have a chapter about how do we take that lesson, whatever it might be, with us and hold on to it. And that is kind of the general introduction to integration. The very next chapter is called Love Yourself Shamelessly, because I realized I had done a very poor job of loving myself through my entire life, both outwardly by, working myself too hard, not having self-care practices, eating like crap, and constantly putting other people before myself. As, an officer, putting my troops before myself, my kids, my family, and everything. Like, wait a second, who's loving me? And I realized, I need to do that first to myself. And so I introduced some practices around self-love. And then the third integration chapter is Embrace Your Imagination, and that is a chapter about creativity, where I encourage people who have been through the psychedelic experience to kind of do what I did in the sense of exploring all these different creative outlets, doing it without shame, without impressing anybody, to just create like a child. And then the fourth and the final chapter on integration is about being alive. I think a lot of us kind of walk through life like zombies. Couple centuries ago, Henry David Thoreau said it this way: most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And that's what I was doing. I was leaving a life of quiet desperation. And after psychedelics, I'm like, okay, I'm going to live the fuck out of this life. And, since then, I really have done that. Like, where does my heart want to go? Where does my passion want to go? Where does my imagination want to go? And to really savor this precious life. To the best of my knowledge, this is the only shot Benjamin gets. And I don't want to come to the end of my life and find that I had not lived, or that I'd been living a life that had been handed to me by society, to actually live the life that I want to live. And there's a number of inspirational quotes in that chapter, and one of them is from Joseph Campbell, the interview with Bill Moyers that we were talking about beforehand. I think the question presented to him was something along the lines of, what is the meaning for life? And Joseph Campbell said, I don't think that's what we're really looking for. I don't like we're looking for the meaning to life. I think what we're actually looking for is the experience of being alive, an experience that resonates with our innermost being so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive. And from that sleepwalking, quiet desperation I felt before to after psychedelics, like, oh, I know what he's talking about. I have had the experience of being alive that does resonate with my innermost being, and I have felt the rapture of being alive. Maybe we can't feel that every moment, but if we're going months or years without feeling that awe in that rapture, we are missing the whole point. We are missing this experience of being an amazing human being.
Who have you seen in your personal experience change dramatically? Can you share with us about people you've known who have gone through a similar process?
Sure. The first client that comes to mind, he was one of my earliest clients. He lived in Florida. He was a conservative Christian and not the sort of guy that typically goes to psychedelics.
How did he find you?
He was referred to me by the ketamine clinic, ketamine being the one psychedelic that is actually legal under the care of medical professionals. And so these clinics have realized, if we give people ketamine, they can have improvements, but statistically, if you really want to have a lasting improvement after these ketamine infusions, having a coach or having a therapist is valuable. So I got him referred to me by a coach, and so I helped him prepare, and then after each infusion we would have conversations. And from the very first infusion it was like that. Like it was the complete, that's a big word, but the complete healing of his pain. For him, it went back to childhood and experiences he had had with his stepfather. And that first ketamine infusion somehow for him allowed him to release that.
You were brought in as a reference, in a counselor capacity?
Yeah, as a coach.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've coached a lot of people before and after their experience, especially around ketamine, because it's easy to get referrals because it's legal.
Was ketamine a part of your journey?
So interestingly, yes. I don't talk about it in the book, but prior to psilocybin, I tried ketamine infusions. And
For depression.
Yeah, for depression. And for
Treatment
me,
resistant.
it didn't work. It didn't work.
You went through like a regimen of 6
Yes,
sessions.
I did.
And did you have psychedelic experiences?
Oh, yes. It was a very interesting experience. I was going so deep into the consciousness and, I don't know, the universe became like math equations. And no, it was a very fascinating exploration of consciousness, but it did not relieve my depression, which I think is actually a very interesting point, because I just talked about a man for whom ketamine was utterly transformational. And for me, it did not work at all. And I think that's worth mentioning because every medicine is not for every person. We all have very unique brain chemistries. What works for one person is not going to work for another. So I go through ketamine and I have interesting experiences, but nothing transformational, nothing that's impacting my depression. And then I move on to psilocybin and boom, in a single night, my depression disappears and never comes back. So as people are considering medicines, I think it's important to listen to what medicine is calling to you. And I also think it's important to not necessarily give up if the first medicine doesn't work. We are all very unique. Iboga is another one where I've seen radical transformations in people's lives. By the time I got to Iboga, I think I'd already done so much work that its meaning and message for me was not that significant.
Something that you actually utilized. You went through the treatment yourself.
Yeah, and I found it fascinating, and I wanted to have the experience of Iboga, so as I coach people around Iboga, I kind of know what they're talking about.
Yeah. In my understanding, Iboga can be some of the most harrowing work that a person could do.
It's a very long psychedelic. It goes on a very long time. And there's a reason it's not a recreational drug. It's not fun.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing Iboga for fun.
Yeah.
But I say that with deep respect, because Iboga is an ancient, beautiful medicine that not only is spiritually profound, but is probably the most effective treatment of opioid addiction.
Yeah.
And traumatic brain injury and PTSD for veterans. In about 10 days, I'm traveling down to Costa Rica to assist with an Iboga ceremony, because a lot of the participants are veterans, and the gentleman who is facilitating the ceremony doesn't have a military background. Thought it would be helpful for me to be there as a voice and a companion for my fellow veterans. Yeah, it has gotten a lot of attention for very good reason.
So the first client that you dealt with who had the ketamine experience, and they were deeply and quickly moved from their experience. Who else? Have you worked with men and women?
Yes, I have worked with both men and women. I think of another client that I talk about in the book named Roxy, and in an MDMA experience, the concept of self-love came up, and she had realized, oh, I'm not doing a very good job of loving myself. I said, oh, let's dig into that. What does it feel like to say you love yourself? And beyond that is the why. Why do you love yourself? Because it's one thing to say it, but if you can build pillars underneath that belief of self-love, then you've built something really strong that is harder to knock down. So the recognition of, oh, I'm a really talented artist. Oh, I'm a very good friend. And from that place of like your highest self, like if you were to go meet yourself, like if Roxy were to go meet Roxy one day, what would you have to say to them and how would you treat them? And that journey of self-love has been really interesting to watch unfold for her. And there's been a lot of continuing revelations around that too. You know, if I love myself, what's my self-care practices? How am I eating? And how do I talk to myself in my head? And that might actually be the most important thing. The more I engage with clients, the more I realized how powerful that inner critic is in most people's heads. It's almost like a lot of people walk around and have a bully inside their head. And it's constant self-doubt and criticism and I'm such an idiot and da-da-da-da-da. And I realized after my first psychedelic experience, I think my inner critic died. I think they had a heart attack and died because I don't talk to myself that way. Maybe there's moments, but overall, I feel like I have cultivated an inner best friend inside my head. And that voice inside our heads, it's going all day long. And I talk about this in the book too. Like, what if we can convert that inner critic to an inner best friend? That completely changes the weather inside our heads and therefore our lives.
I went to an interesting experience once, and in one of the exercises, they were talking about viewing the inner voice as your inner dominatrix, and that they were just saying, you little shit bag, like you're so, and then to view it as somebody who was kind of working with you in a way that you almost sort of liked or at least could appreciate somehow. But just the idea of radically reframing that, the nature of that voice. If you could learn to see it as somebody who was just doing their dominatrix routine, you know, slapping you around, but not necessarily as a true adversary.
Yeah. So maybe, I don't know, maybe some people get off on the inner dominatrix, but I would rather have an inner lover.
yeah, that's a nice thought.
Yeah, well, that brings up an interesting point because all of these thoughts, all of these voices inside your head, they're actually just trying to help you. Every voice, every part of you is actually just trying to help you. But unfortunately, the way they're trying to help you is not always helpful.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, as a child, we have these experiences and we build these inner defenses. And those defenses might make sense in the moment, but 30 years later, maybe these defenses are actually causing way more harm than good, and they need to be taken apart and maybe replaced. So for example, I'll use a personal one. On the playground, I noticed something really quick. If I'm getting bullied, if I punch the bully, he's not going to bully me again because it's not worth the trouble. And so I learned to fight back whenever there was, a poke coming at me from a kid on the playground. And that maybe was helpful on the playground, but it's not particularly helpful in real life. And it's not particularly helpful in an intimate relationship. Imagine that same lesson of childhood coming into an intimate relationship. So every time my lover pokes at me, I poke back. I punch back in some metaphorical way. Okay, that's not helpful. And it's not appropriate to this situation. It made sense on the playground. It does not make sense with my lover. But God damn it, that mechanism was reinforced enough so that, yeah, it does cause this reaction of you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you, which is ultimately the death of the relationship if that persists.
A depressing thought that I experience often is that bully energy wins on Earth. I feel like Earth has three types of people: bullies, victims, and bystanders. And bystanders, well, there's also heroic capacity, but I think like really there's people who want to do their own thing and don't necessarily have a destructive inclination towards others. There's people who for some reason wind up becoming preyed upon very easily, or they're more susceptible to influence by destructive forces, and then there's destructive forces. And I don't know what that means for our immediate future. I feel like bully energy is extremely powerful in this dimension. I don't know how we get past it, because if you take the gloves off and you stop, if you become completely inelegant in trying to win your position or solve the problem to your liking and the liking of your supporters, there's nothing like brutal ruthlessness to accomplish that goal. So what do you think about that idea? Like there's that energy is so strong and it's so devoid of being reasoned with or being loved. I think it can change, but the forces that it's like everything is fundamentally love, and from all accounts I've heard, when you go that deep into a psychedelic experience, you can grasp that and feel it and be a part of it. But in this density, that bully energy is so powerful and effective, and I just feel like we're getting more and more into utilizing that to get what we want. How does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. When I look out at, our society in particular, it does seem that we've entered an era of cruelty culture, and that bullying does win and might makes right. And, I spent 25 years in the most powerful military in the history of the world. I worked in the Pentagon on what I believe is the most expensive weapon system ever created. It works. It works, but it also makes us miserable. So do we want to be powerful and miserable, or do we want to be happy and loving? And I do think psychedelics are a pathway to a different way, a pathway to opening the heart and to a different way of being. About 6 months ago, I was at a ayahuasca ceremony there. There was a man, I think around 70 years old, and he said after the end of the weekend, "I've never been anywhere where people were so kind to me." And so I think these circles of, vulnerability and love can be very transformative. And I'm trying to find and teach a different way of being. I've been thinking a lot lately about what's the next book. And I think the next book is about masculinity. My working title is Love Without Armor, What Psychedelics Can Teach Us About Being a Man. And I think the cover image is going to be the San Pedro cactus. For listeners who may not know, San Pedro is a cactus that's been in north of South America. It used to be called Wachuma by the native population. And it is called the grandfather medicine. And like ayahuasca is considered the grandmother, the feminine medicine, San Pedro is the grandfather, the masculine one. And the first time I took it, I was thinking about that metaphor, and I was wondering, boy, that doesn't really seem to fit, because on San Pedro, I'm very open-hearted, I feel very safe, I feel very connected, I feel very loving. I mean, it's a very joyous, maybe even sometimes playful medicine. So where's the masculinity in that? And then it was a click. It's the grandfather medicine. What's different about grandfather? Grandfather has nothing to prove. He's already made his fortune. He's already conquered the world. He's already had his kids. He's checked all the boxes on what it is to be a man. And now he can be relaxed and secure. And I remembered seeing my father with my children and watching him be so playful and silly and loving with my kids. And I thought, where the fuck was this guy when I was growing up? But it's different because when I was growing up, he was like me. He was out there trying to conquer the world and make his fortune and, be a man. And at that point in his life, he was retired and he was grandpa. And yeah, so he was able to tap into this, more secure, playful, nothing to prove masculine energy. Now, if he needs to, turn it on and go be a protector, yeah, he can do that. He can find that, other version of masculinity when it's appropriate, but he doesn't need to live there. He can go back to this default state of a more relaxed, secure masculinity. So I think there's something within San Pedro that actually has a lot to teach our culture about what it is to be a man. And I think that's very necessary. I feel bad for young men growing up today. I think it's a very confusing time. I think there's a lot of really negative messaging going towards men and masculinity. And there's not a lot of voices celebrating men today. There's not a lot of voices honoring what is great about being a man today. And there's not a lot of good role models or examples right now. I raised 2 daughters, so I don't have the experience of being a father to a boy, but I think it's a difficult time for young men and young boys, and I don't think there's a lot of empathy for them either. So I think that's a place where I can be helpful in the future.
You said that the psychedelic can serve as, how did you describe it? Emotional constipation is, did you call your depression emotional constipation?
I think at the root of my depression was emotional constipation.
Okay.
And because I was, denying and suppressing these feelings, I was denying a part of myself and I wasn't being a full human being. I was living a life where I was a caricature of masculinity. I was so wrapped up in being a warrior and making my fortune and rising through the ranks and getting all those gold stars and like degrees and everything that like I thought about like feelings and emotions and all that is like being maybe too feminine. And I had to like shift there. Like, I mean, we can use that masculine and feminine language if that's helpful, but like that's not actually what it is. It's actually about being a full human being. It was almost like I was half a person before, and now I'm a full person because I am willing to acknowledge what is going on here in a way I never could before.
I hope that we were able to touch upon the hero's journey idea in enough aspects of what we covered today to be able to fulfill your wish. Was there anything else about the hero's journey specifically that you had in mind that you wanted to share while we still have time to visit?
Yeah, I sure do. The metaphor that I use in this book, especially in, I think, chapter 5, Enter the Cave, it brings me to what is perhaps one of my favorite quotes of Joseph Campbell and maybe of all time. In the cave you fear to enter is the treasure that you seek. I think that is the heart of the psychedelic journey. I think that is at the heart of healing. And those caves that we need to go into can be frightening. The things that we're shameful about are in those caves. The things that we're afraid of or insecure about are in those caves. But if we really want to heal, we have to go into those caves. And we go into that cave and we see a dragon guarding the treasure. And my invitation is to not take out the sword and slay the dragon. My invitation is to go in there and hug the dragon and find that he'll leave of his own accord. And now you're in the cave with the treasure. And you pick up that treasure and you leave. And you have that treasure forever. And your job now is to share it with other people. That's the hero's journey. And that's the most manly fucking thing you can do.
What do you find to be mind-bending? What bends your mind?
What bends my mind is that I think there's this perception that when we take psychedelics, we are leaving reality and going off into an altered state, which appears to be true. But what bends my mind is I think that what we're experiencing in the psychedelic journey might be as real as what we're experiencing right now in the normal world. I think that special world of psychedelia is as real or maybe even more real than this ordinary state.
Wild. Benjamin, I could talk with you for another hour, but you've got places to go and people to visit with. Thank you very much for coming on the Mindbend podcast.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been an absolute pleasure.